Welcome to the Aesthetics of Cool podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Aesthetic of Cool. This is Keela Boose, and I'm here with Terry Marsh, and we want to bring you all things cultural, avant-garde, past preserving, and future inspiring.
I'm Terry Marsh, and the Aesthetic of Cool includes conversations on topics impacting Black culture, art, literature, music, community, and politics. We welcome your thoughts.
Yes. First of all, let me tell you who I am, Keela Boose. I am a professor at the beautiful Norfolk State University, where we're recording this podcast. And I love teaching about English, literature, all writings, and essays. So here we're going to look into the past writings, look at the past achievements of many African Americans and others to really dissect and get into them and see the value and explore the value for our listening audience.
And I'm Terry Marsh. I teach in the Department of Mass Communication and Journalism here at Norfolk State, and I am the director of our Quality Enhancement Plan, or QEP. A lot of people ask us, what's the QEP? Well, our Quality Enhancement Plan is based on finding an area where students need the most help and the most encouragement, and then highlighting that area, identifying that area, and then strengthening that area. We call our QEP CREW, Close Reading for Effective Writing, because, as you can tell by the name, our students need to focus more heavily on close reading and effective writing. However, today,
I have to agree with you on that. As I teach English, you have to read carefully in order to write effectively, and you learn patterns of writing and are introduced to new types of writing that enhances your writing. So thank you for that explanation. So today's topic, the QEP committee chose this book, Black AF History by Michael Heriot. Now, Terry, why did the committee choose Black AF History?
well, we usually try to choose a text that will complement the university, that will engage students, but also our faculty. Because if the faculty aren't engaged, then it's that much more challenging in teaching the text. However, this particular book came to my attention. I was unfamiliar with the book. One of our committee members suggested the book, and after reading a short overview of the book, I thought that it might be a good fit for our students.
Well, I have to tell you, I am so glad the committee chose this book. When I began reading it, it is laugh out loud funny.
It is.
And it's hard to imagine, and I want everybody who within the sounds of our voices to get this book, Black AF History by Michael Heriot. I've never read a history this engaging and this well-researched with so many endnotes to help you understand how he gathered the information and where to go to verify it. It's brilliant.
Absolutely.
And it's funny.
And I think he does a good job of keeping it relatable. I think that the book is written in a very conversational manner, although he specifically identifies historic incidents that I wasn't even familiar with. The most important thing, though, Keela, is I think that he talks and communicates history from a perspective that up until this book I have not seen or heard.
That's right. And there have been African American writers who have given us histories and told us histories, but oftentimes in the past, they were and had to be more academic and intellectually focused just to be taken seriously. So Michael Heriot has drawn upon them, standing on their shoulders, but also telling this history in such a humorous way, it takes some of the edge off of the historical facts, which were, in some cases, horrific. So, and he goes all the way back almost to the beginning.
Prior to America being America.
Absolutely. I mean, he goes back into European history and African history and talks about how, now we're just thought of as Africans or African Americans. And in Africa, we're known by our tribes.
Absolutely.
And our lands and our history, which was erased once we got here. Heriot goes back to when the Moors ruled Europe for 700 years.
Absolutely.
And people often don't talk about that history, but it existed. He tells us about Musa Mansa, who was in the 1300s, I believe. I have to check that out. But he was, at that time, the wealthiest man in the world.
That's correct.
How fascinating is that, and why we wouldn't know it is the whitewashing of history, which is the subtitle of this book.
Absolutely.
Right, the
unwhitewashed story
of America is something else. So let me tell you a little bit about, or our listening audience, a little bit about Michael Harriot, if they're unfamiliar. This was my first introduction to Harriot. He is a writer for The Griot, which is a digital broadcast TV network, and it has news, entertainment, opinion, and video content. It's directed toward African Americans. So I knew about The Griot. But he also writes for The Washington Post, The Atlantic Magazine, and he has a podcast with our own, Virginia's own, Pharrell Media Entertainment Group. So I'm so glad that I have been introduced to him. I'm going to follow him on all ways that I can because I need this kind of intelligence and laughter in my life.
Well, I've got some wonderful news for you, Keila.
What?
As of January 30th, Mr. Harriot will be visiting the Norfolk State University campus.
Oh, my.
And he will be speaking to the NSU community from Wilder Center.
How outstanding is that? Well done.
Well, I think also that it will be a very good opportunity. Maybe, hopefully, we can have an opportunity to speak with Mr. Harriot.
Oh, that would be wonderful. To have him on with us, that would be wonderful because I can understand how his mind works, but I want to hear it more from him. But he's just amazing intelligence. And so that's always good to be around. And the lights he's going to shine here on this campus, that will be amazing as well.
Well, I think so, too. I usually try to get students involved with these opportunities.
Yes.
However, we spent a lot of time talking about how wonderful the book is, Keila. Let's talk about the book.
Let's
Let's provide the audience with some type of an overview so that they can understand what Mr. Harriot is actually discussing with his audience.
Yes. Well, at the very beginning of the book, he captured my attention. The first line in the book is, "I remember when I first discovered America." That is a direct quote. Well, that's from his perspective as a 9 or 10-year-old boy, the night in 1980 when Ronald Reagan was elected. But the way he phrases it immediately leads one to think of Christopher Columbus discovering America. But this is his take on every individual in America, when they first grasped the notion, how they discover America. So his example is the night Ronald Reagan gets elected president, he has already committed a cardinal sin. And that cardinal sin is, as many of us can identify with, listening to grown folks talk. Have you been admonished not to listen to grown folks talk?
You know what? I come from a black mom and mother and father.
Yes.
And when grown folks were talking in the room,
you need to leave yourself
you need
on
to
out
find
of
your
there.
way out the room.
That's right. That's right. That's conversation not privy for your ears. So he had been listening to his grandmother and mother talk, and his grandmother said to his mother casually, "If Ronald Reagan gets elected, we're going to be back out in the fields picking cotton." Well, the boy heard that, and because he's well-read, he understood that meant going back to slavery, and he was horrified. What did he do, Terry?
You know what?
I know. First, he drew a map, a route to get to Canada.
Oh, that's
because
right.
from his understanding, they were going to have to leave because he was. And he could read. He said, "You know what happens to slaves when they can read?" So, he was afraid for his life. He went into the books and found the map, the route when you need to escape north to Canada. And he packed his bag. And he said in his bag, he packed his favorite underoos, some corduroys, and some thick sweaters because he said, "I heard the winters could be quite brutal in Canada." That's when I fell out. That's when I started laughing.
And that's the beginning of the book. So he actually
Yes.
engages his audience right from the
the
beginning.
start.
Getting into the text, I think one of the first things that really caught my attention, and I'm going to read this, I don't want to paraphrase it. "The true origin of America is intriguing enough without embellishment, a tale that includes cannibalism, cross-country adventures, and the type of brazen incompetence that almost doomed the experiment in thievery." I thought that was a
Brilliant way to phrase it.
particularly to start the text.
Yes.
And he says, it uses a couple of things in particular, without embellishment, indicating that much of American history has been embellished.
Yes.
We only hear about one perspective. We only hear from one side of, and it's generally the winners that tell the history.
That's right.
But let's talk about seeing history from a different perspective.
Right.
How does that look?
It looks like this book to me, but it also, he reveals some very important truths throughout. And he, in addition to not embellishing, he makes sure to reveal that which was erased. Or so he takes the cover off of what has been previously covered to expose the audience and help people understand the contributions and achievements of people of African descent all over the world, and how we got dispersed all over the world, and how we were always a part of culture. We didn't just begin to exist once the Europeans came, going on 500 years, came to Africa, and they had already been in Africa. Africans had already been in Europe.
Absolutely.
You could swim from across the Mediterranean if you chose to, from the point of Morocco going to Spain. So they had already been interacting in various ways, whether it was war, whether it was peace, whether it was trading. But when the Europeans decided to cull the people of Africa as a mechanism to build wealth and have free labor in the new world, yes, that's when our history began to be whitewashed, because you can't enslave a people in the manner in which Africans were enslaved for America and South America and still recognize their humanity.
Well, I think he does a really good job, and when I say he, the author does a really good job of separating slavery in the context of how slavery existed prior to chattel slavery. And it was the Europeans who instituted chattel slavery and slavery for life.
Yes.
Most countries or most cultures had some form of,
from Egyptian times through Greek and Roman times on. Yes.
And even in Africa.
Right.
And he identifies that in the book. But it wasn't considered slavery for life. Right. You still had rights and privileges.
Yes.
You were just under the assignage of a different tribe or culture.
Yes, very much so.
So one of the things that I thought was interesting was his discussion about the challenges between England, Spain, and France in trying to establish colonies outside of those host countries.
Yes.
One of the things that he talked about was with Spain, much of what they were doing for money. They were virtually broke.
Absolutely. And he also explains the claiming lands and building riches for nations. And sometimes that involved marriage amongst folks or dissolutions of marriages amongst folks, but it's still a land grab, a power grab for riches and money, and to be the most important nation in the world. At one time that was seafaring Britain, at some other time it was the Vikings, and at yet another time, and this pivotal time we're talking about, it was between the Portuguese and the Spanish.
That's correct.
And England. Yes. So I found it fascinating that some of these deals made amongst these countries had to be blessed by the Pope.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, during that time, the Vatican was becoming the most powerful organization throughout Europe.
Yes.
And in so much as serving as a country in itself.
Yes.
They had to lend Italy money to buy slaves, and which is interesting because the Catholic Church has completely divested itself from even the discussion of slavery. However, it's interesting that slavery would not have been able to have been financed without the help of the Catholic Church.
Yes, that is fascinating. And ultimately, while they may say that they're divested, they cannot divest themselves from the history that actually existed. And so it's important that we talk about all aspects. This could lead into so many other conversations because Georgetown University in Washington had to recognize that they owned slaves and for debt sent them downriver and sold them. And now they are trying to pay reparations, but yet and still you can't erase the history. You should acknowledge it and do what you need to repair it as much as possible.
Absolutely.
And then joined together. So,
I mean, reparations is a discussion for another show.
It is. We talked about that the
We
other
will
day.
get there.
Yes.
We will get there.
Yes.
However,
Well, one more thing about reparations. One thing I read that Michael Harriot makes clear is that during the slave uprisings, and he recounts many here, and you and I talked about how we're both students of history, yet there were some we had not heard about.
absolutely.
Right.
Particularly those in South Carolina that I was
Right.
unaware of.
And those that are in Louisiana and how Louisiana Purchase came to be. But particularly, there was a slave uprising, and it was either in Louisiana or South Carolina. And the slaves, or the enslaved people who rose up, had been caught and had been executed, and their governments paid the former
Absolutely.
owners for the destruction of their property, the human beings who had been enslaved and trying to get their freedom.
Absolutely.
That amazed me. So,
And that's a theme that if Mr. Harriet kind of covers that from a historical
Yes, he does.
from a historical perspective, the government paying former slave owners instead of the slaves themselves, there is a history to that. And not unlike that of the period of Reformation, where we were supposed to have gotten 40 acres and a mule, and then all of a sudden that reverted
That
back to the former owners as well.
right, which to me harkens back to the deals made with indigenous tribes of people here that were revoked.
Absolutely.
Fork-tongued, as we used to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So those, if they're made with a certain people, and those people don't have the power that the organization or the group who did them wrong have, then people will change their minds and pave it over, and it never existed. No, we don't owe you that.
So I have a question, and
Yes,
it's
sir.
one that bugs me repeatedly. And it might be a question that if we can never speak with the author, I would love to ask.
It's going to happen. We are manifesting that right now.
My question is, for a culture of people who propose to follow Christianity and the principles of Christianity, why is it so easy to do harm to other cultures, to other people, to other ethnicities, and then be able to justify those actions through your belief in Christianity?
Sir, that is a $10 million question for which I have no answer. I don't understand it. I am a Christian, and I was raised in the Catholic Church, and one of the things that I recall, one of the songs we would sing is, they'll know we are Christian by our love, which also means by our actions and the way we do. And if your actions go against the 10 Commandments, that's really all you need to know about life to act and behave properly. If you believe in those 10 Commandments, then you're not doing harm to others.
Right.
You're just not, So,
However, we're still dealing with those same issues today.
Yes,
we
we are.
have election coming up in about 3 weeks.
yes.
About 2.5 weeks, we have elections coming up.
Yes, we do.
And we're still dealing with issues of humanity, issues of the respect of one culture toward
To
another.
others. Yes, to others. Is something that we should do. It's something that America is vacillated on. So there have been times when we have, as a nation, overall embraced the ideal that we all have to live together, coexist together, and we can all help one another, that we are unified as the United States of America, as one group of citizens working toward a common goal. That should be our thought. Now, America prizes rugged individualism as well, but you can be an individual but still work together for the common good. If you want and have massive amounts of money, sometimes it comes strictly down to economics. If you want and have massive amount of money, you can do that without subjugating whole groups of people. You can do that.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But you have to think of, everybody has to have the same opportunity. Racism in America cannot be upheld. People are qualified in every race, creed, and color. And so we have to embrace that as a nation. We cannot let one group of people say, And oftentimes, it's white privilege. You cannot be allowed to say, my history didn't exist. You don't get to teach my history. I am not worthy. I have to show twice as many credentials as you, and I still might not get the job, which is what I heard today, people saying about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. She's qualified in every way, and he's a felon. And it's still a contest? She's in law enforcement.
Right.
She has no stain on her record. He's a criminal many times over. A sexual predator. He's been convicted of that. He has been convicted of fraud. He's bankrupted his casinos. When you bankrupt a casino, all the money that comes into there, then you are bad with money. I just have to say. And it's still a contest. It's shocking to me, but all of that ties into this book that we're reading.
Without a doubt. And I think there is a much larger cultural, and when I say cultural, I mean American perspective that we are going to have to deal with, and that is the perspective of the diminishing role of the white male in our and leadership in our country.
Yes.
Because I think that we are entering a period where there is the expectation, both the expectation that other cultures should have opportunities, but there's also that pushback against a certain group of individuals who feel that they're losing ground.
Yes, and it's fear.
It is not that they're losing the country.
Right.
It's that they're losing their positions of power.
Yes, and they don't want to, in some cases, allow the power to be shared. It's about sharing the power. It's not about taking it over altogether.
So do you think that inspires a lot of the discussion toward immigration?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. But I also find it fascinating, many of the immigrants who come here, they start off with jobs that I've not seen Americans do since they were forced to do it in slavery.
Oh, without a doubt.
We're not many of us Americans who have been born here are not going to be out in the fields picking vegetables and working in 100-degree heat throughout the day.
10 hours a day.
10 hours a day for minimum or less than minimum wage. We're not doing that. And oftentimes
I'm not doing that.
I'm not doing it either. And oftentimes, though my people have done it, I know that for a fact.
Oh, without a doubt.
But, once immigrants get into America, you often see all these wonderful stories of how people achieved, how they worked, and in some cases slaved so that their families could do better. They knew that it wasn't necessarily their generation that would really blossom and shine,
right.
But their children and then their grandchildren, they're going to college or they're creating a business and they'll be able to sustain themselves. Mm-hmm. And, we can help make that happen, we as a nation.
It's ironic that in Black AF history, Michael Harriot identifies the periods of integration, including those of the Italian, of the Irish.
Yes.
And ironically, those groups came into this country under the same unfortunate circumstances that many are coming into this country from South America, Central America, and the Middle Caribbean.
Yes.
I see from a cultural, particularly in language, from a cultural perspective, how that could be a little challenging in a city like maybe, let's say, New York City.
Why so? Tell me.
Because when you come to this country and you are going to congregate with people who at least can explain to you what's going on, where you're going to be a little bit more comfortable. Mm-hmm. So the cultural connection there is language. And that has been true historically, and that is why most immigrants kind of fall into pockets. Even now, you'll find that West African immigrants generally will fall into pockets within a city.
Yes. They go where people are.
They go where they are comfortable.
Yes.
They go where they're
there's a history of people like them being there, and it helps.
But within those communities, there is also a culture of caring that extends to other individuals in that community.
Yes.
However, I'm not so sure that it extends outside of those pockets or outside of those communities.
I don't believe it necessarily does, no.
We don't embrace, as a country, not me specifically, but as a country, we don't embrace the other.
We don't
Yes.
embrace differences. No. And I've actually seen those experiences outside of this country. I've seen Americans go into other countries. I was in France at a McDonald's. Some guy from Texas demanded that the young lady, who was French, speak English to him.
Which is outrageous and ridiculous.
Why go to France expecting everybody to be able to communicate to you?
Right. That is entitlement. I mean, most clearly. You have to be able to communicate with people in their land, in their language. And it is often true that many people speak English, and they've been taught 2 or 3 languages. And oftentimes we're not able to, but when we go to another country, we need to prepare ourselves with certain words and phrases. But that's entitlement, saying everybody has to cater to me because I am American. No, that's not true.
That's absolutely not true.
Right. And one of the things I think that we are meant to learn on this journey of life in the world is that we're supposed to move higher and higher. Diplomacy needs to be our currency, not war. We're supposed to get to the point where we can discuss things and come to a beneficial agreement for all involved. It does not have to be about aggression, war, or fighting. Life does not have to be that. And I think, I'm hoping that in the next few years we can work toward that goal. It's a lifetime goal, but I just think that we're meant to do better, and we're meant to be better in order to achieve peace and a good life for all. So first place to start is at home and in America, and learning about our history properly so that we, A, don't forget it, and B, don't repeat it. Because if we don't know, we will let people
be connected to it.
Yes.
And
be proud.
Absolutely. The overriding narrative of history does not include me.
Okay.
It does not include, my grandmother who was a sharecropper in North Carolina and maintained a 300-acre farm. I don't know how, but she did it with little resources and everything in the world against her during the early 1900s. So,
that's your book to write.
That is my book to write.
That's your
However,
book to write. Yes.
I feel a responsibility to her.
Yes.
I feel a responsibility because if she didn't hold it together, I wouldn't be here.
That's correct. And I feel that same responsibility to my family. We are of a generation where we recognize how different life was for our grandparents than it is for us. And the opportunities that befitted them, which were few and far between, they were hard scrabble, and they had to make it happen. I think about my grandmother when I spend money, and I think, this is like from one of the nickels she saved. One time, after she had passed away, we collected all her belongings, and I found a pocketbook full of pennies, just full of pennies. I used that for something to honor her, but that's how hard she saved so that I could move forward in my life. I used to go visit her in Glen Allen, Mississippi when I was in college. And then she'd send me out to visit my relatives all around the little town in Glen Allen. And I would go next door to a cousin, Mary Jenkins. And Mary, I remember, gave me $5 in change, so that I would feel good when I went back to college and have a little spending money, and everyone would give me what they had. I treasured that $5 in change because I knew it was something that she saved for to benefit me and to bless me. And I'm just so blessed by the memories I have of my extended family down there. But I'm writing a book currently about my family and the achievements they made. My grandmother also had a farm. My grandfather, a different grandfather, had a farm, 40 acres, and he had some mules. But he scraped that together. He could not read and he could not write, but he bequeathed that to his children. And I have a portion of it as a grandchild, and I am appreciative.
Absolutely.
I know whose shoulders I stand on. And I'm trying to share this with our children, our students, the people who come after, because it's important to know, they're going to go so far in these next few years. They have so many more tools to work with in some cases than we were, but we have to give them the benefit of experience and education so they can jettison their way on out to the universe.
Without making the same mistakes that
Yes.
those who came before them
might have made.
Right. And knowing economics, knowing money, knowing how to use it for your benefit, not throwing it away, not being foolish. Yes.
Absolutely. Just as a program note, you're listening to The Aesthetic of Cool, conversations on the topics impacting Black culture, including art, literature, music, community, and politics.
Terry, it has been a wonderful half an hour or so.
It has been.
Time flies.
It's a wonderful conversation. We will continue this conversation. We want to explore a little bit more throughout coming weeks the Black AF history. We want to pick particular passages from the book to share with you and have discussions around. We will also have guests.
Yes. And we would love your feedback. Please contact us. So I'm going to give you my contact information. My email here at Norfolk State is KABOO, S as in Sam, E, at NSU.edu. That's caboose at NSU.edu.
And I am WTMARSH at NSU.edu. Please join us next week for The Aesthetic of Cool.
And do not forget to vote. So voting is coming up soon. Make sure you let everybody know. Take your friends and neighbors. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Keela Boose.
And Terry Marsh.
All right. All the best. We'll see you next time.